I don't even know how to process this, but I need to put it somewhere before I lose my mind. I was having a normal day, work, daycare pickup, dinner prep, all the usual single mom things, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. Mrs. Wilson? The voice on the other end was unfamiliar. I hesitated. This is Grace Wilson. This is Officer Martinez with the Denver PD. I'm calling regarding your husband, James Wilson. He was involved in a traffic accident earlier today and is currently in the hospital. My body froze. My heart did that weird, stuttering thing before it starts pounding. I must have misheard. I'm sorry, my husband? No, that's impossible. My voice came out shaky. James Wilson is dead. There was a pause on the other end. Ma'am, I understand this is shocking, but I assure you, the man we have identified as James Wilson is alive and currently being treated for minor injuries. We'd like you to come down and confirm his identity. I felt like I was going to be sick. My knees buckled and I had to grab the edge of the counter to keep myself upright. My husband, my dead husband, was in a hospital in Denver? No, that couldn't be right. He had died 2 years ago. I had mourned him. Our son Henry had mourned him. I forced myself to breathe, to think logically. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was someone with the same name. Or maybe this was some kind of cruel scam. But the officer sounded so sure. I forced myself to speak. Where is he? He gave me the hospital's name. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely hold on to the phone. Ma'am, the officer continued, his tone careful. He was with a woman at the time of the accident. She identified herself as his fiancée. Her name is Zoe. And that was the moment I realized my entire life had been a lie. I hung up without another word, grabbed my keys and drove. I got to the hospital and walked in feeling like I was in some kind of alternate reality. I went to the front desk, barely able to say the words. I'm here to see James Wilson. The nurse directed me to a room, and the entire way there I told myself over and over, this is a mistake, this is a mistake, this is a mistake. But it wasn't. Because the second I stepped into that room I saw him, James, looking exactly the same as he did the day he died. And standing beside him, a woman I had never seen before, her perfectly manicured hands gripping his as she whispered something to him. My stomach dropped. I must have made some kind of noise because she turned, saw me, and immediately frowned. Who are you? I couldn't even look at her. I was too busy staring at James, my husband, who had just realized who I was. His entire face went white, and for the first time since I'd walked in, he looked scared. Grace, he whispered. And all I could say was, what the fuck is going on? James looked like he had just seen a ghost. I guess in a way I had too. The room was dead silent for a few agonizing seconds. The woman, Zoe, I assumed, was staring at me with open hostility, like I was the one intruding. Meanwhile, James looked like a man caught in a trap, eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route. I took a step forward, my legs moving on autopilot. You're supposed to be dead. Zoe scoffed. Who is this? James opened his mouth, then shut it. His lips parted again, but nothing came out. So I answered for him. His wife. Zoe's face twisted in confusion, then disbelief. No, that's not possible. James is a widower. His wife died years ago. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh, even as my hand shook at my sides. Oh, I died? I died? That's rich, considering I'm the one who held a funeral for him. James finally found his voice. Grace. His tone was pleading, but I wasn't interested in hearing whatever bullshit excuse he was about to give me. I took another step toward the bed, lowering my voice into something sharp and dangerous. You better start talking, James. And you better make it good. He swallowed hard. Before he could open his mouth, a doctor stepped into the room, looking between the three of us with thinly veiled concern. Mr. Wilson, you really shouldn't be under stress. I'm not Mr. Wilson, I snapped before James could speak. Apparently he's Mr. Wilson. But that's news to me, considering he's been dead for 2 years. The doctor froze, clearly not paid enough to deal with this level of drama. James groaned, pinching the bridge of his nose. Grace, please. But I was already done. I turned on my heel and stormed out of the room, shoving past a pair of wide-eyed nurses. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to get away. I barely made it to a quiet hallway before I braced my hands against the wall, forcing myself to breathe. In out. In out. I was in shock. I had to be. James. The man I had met when I was 23. The man who had swept me off my feet with his easy charm and his reckless spontaneity. The man who had convinced me to marry him within a year. Who had promised me adventure and excitement. And for a while he delivered. We were young and stupid, moving from city to city, chasing new jobs and new opportunities. He was always the center of attention, always the storyteller at parties. James the Bold, I used to call him. He could sell a lie better than anyone I knew. Guess I should have paid more attention to that. Then Henry was born and things changed. I changed. I became a mother. I became responsible. James? Not so much. He got restless. His job took him overseas for long stretches, and at first I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He sent money. He FaceTimed Henry at night. He told me he missed us. But over time the calls became less frequent. The money started coming in irregularly. He missed Henry's 3rd birthday, then his 4th, then Christmas. And every time I confronted him, it was the same excuses. Work is demanding. The company needs me. I don't have a choice, Grace. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. Because the alternative, the idea that he was choosing to stay away, was too painful to accept. Until one day he just stopped calling. Then came the phone call. A representative from his company. A snorkeling accident. A shark attack. No body recovered. I remember sinking onto the kitchen floor, gripping the phone so hard my fingers went numb. I remember Henry coming in, asking why Mommy was crying. I remember how empty the house felt after that. And now I find out he was never dead at all. That whole time while I was mourning him, while I was breaking trying to rebuild our lives without him, he was alive. Living another life. With her. A wave of nausea rolled through me. I pressed my forehead against the wall, squeezing my eyes shut. This wasn't real. This wasn't happening. But it was. And the worst part? I had a terrible sinking feeling that this rabbit hole went even deeper. My hands were still shaking when I made it outside the hospital. The cool air hit my face, but it did nothing to calm the storm inside me. My mind kept replaying the same thought over and over. James was alive. James had never been dead. How the hell had I not seen this coming? I closed my eyes, trying to go back to that moment. The phone call. The gut-wrenching grief. The way my entire world had collapsed in a single second. It had been a Friday. I remember because Henry had just gotten home from preschool, full of excitement about some craft he made. And I had been in the middle of fixing us both dinner when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. It was a foreign number, and I assumed it was another spam call. But something in me, some instinct, made me pick up. Mrs. Wilson? Yes, who's this? This is Mark Evans from Horizon Global. James's company. That was strange. He usually handled his own work matters. I'm sorry to call so late, but I have some terrible news. Your husband, James Wilson, was in an accident earlier today. My heart had stopped in my chest. An accident? His voice was too calm, too rehearsed. I'm afraid there was a tragic snorkeling incident. James, he didn't make it. The room had started spinning. What? The authorities are still searching, but it appears to have been a shark attack. They haven't recovered his body. Shark attack. Shark attack. I had dropped to the floor, barely able to breathe. No, that can't be right. I just talked to him. My voice cracked. I'm so sorry, Mark had said. I know this must be incredibly difficult. Difficult didn't even begin to cover it. I had asked for details. I had begged for more information. But everything they told me was vague. Nobody. No eyewitnesses except for a few other tourists who saw a commotion in the water. And then, a few days later, I got the call from James's supposed co-worker, his friend Daniel. Grace, I know this is hard, but I was with him that morning. We were snorkeling together. I saw the blood. His voice had cracked. There was nothing I could do. That was when it hit me. That was when I believed. And that was when I had to tell Henry that his father wasn't coming home. Jesus Christ. I pressed a shaking hand to my mouth, trying to force back the bile rising in my throat. I had grieved this man. I had buried an empty casket. I had watched my son cry for a father who had never really left. And now, after 2 years of hell, I find out he faked the whole damn thing? I heard the hospital doors slide open behind me, but I didn't turn. Grace. His voice. His actual voice. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. Go back inside, James. I can't just let you walk away. I spun on him so fast he actually took a step back. Let me? Let me. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. You died, James. You died, and I had to pick up the pieces. You left me. You left Henry. His face contorted, and for a split second I thought I saw something like shame flicker in his eyes. But then Zoe stepped out behind him, arms crossed. This is getting ridiculous, she muttered. James, let's go. I turned my glare on her. Do you even know who he really is? She scoffed. Of course I do. He's my fiancé. The rage inside me burned hotter. Oh yeah? Did he tell you that he already has a wife? A son? Zoe faltered for the first time. I looked back at James. Does she know about the funeral? About the life insurance? About the fact that you let your child think you were dead? He grimaced. Grace. No. You don't get to talk. My voice was shaking. You killed the man I thought I knew. And now you're just some lying stranger standing in front of me. I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving him standing there. Because if I stayed any longer, I might have actually killed him for Real. I don't remember driving home that night. I don't remember anything except the feeling of my heart pounding so hard it hurt, my fingers gripping the steering wheel like a lifeline, and the cold, numb rage that settled deep in my bones. James was alive. Alive. And for 2 years, I had been drowning in grief while he was off playing house with some other woman. By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway, my hands were still shaking. The porch light was on, casting a warm glow against the dark night. And through the front window, I could see Henry sitting cross-legged on the floor, playing with his toy cars. My son. Our son. The child James had abandoned without a second thought. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to pull it together. Henry couldn't see me like this. He didn't know yet, and I wasn't about to blindside him with the impossible truth that his father, the man he had cried for, the man I had told bedtime stories about just to keep his memory alive, was actually a lying piece of garbage. I walked inside, plastering on a smile. Hey, buddy. Henry's head popped up, his little face lighting up. Mommy! I barely had time to brace myself before he launched into my arms, all giggles and warmth. I hugged him tight, closing my eyes and breathing him in. He still smelled like baby shampoo and Crayola markers. My little boy. The only thing that had kept me going after James died. My mom walked in from the kitchen, her sharp eyes scanning my face. Grace? You look pale. What's wrong? I hesitated. How was I supposed to say it? Hey, remember that husband I mourned for 2 years? Turns out he faked his own death and is now engaged to some random woman. I couldn't. Not yet. I forced a tired smile. Long day at work. Mom didn't buy it for a second, but she let it go. You want me to put Henry to bed? I shook my head. No, I'll do it. Henry was already tugging on my hand, leading me toward his room. His bedtime routine was the same as always, brushing his teeth, changing into dinosaur pajamas, and climbing into bed with his stuffed turtle. Can we do 2 stories tonight? He asked, eyes wide with hope. I kissed his forehead. Of course, baby. I read to him, my voice steady even as my mind spiraled. And when he finally drifted off, I stayed beside him, watching his little chest rise and fall. How the hell was I going to tell him? The next few weeks were a blur. After James's death, I had to start over from scratch. No life insurance payout because, surprise, nobody meant no official confirmation of death. I had spent months battling paperwork, proving I was the sole guardian of my son, while also scrambling to find a stable job. I had moved back in with my parents at first, swallowing my pride because I had no other choice. I worked temp jobs, took night shifts at a call center, anything I could do to make ends meet while trying to hold myself together. And then, finally, things had started to fall into place. I got a stable job as an office manager. Henry adjusted to preschool. I saved up enough to rent our own little apartment, nothing fancy, but it was ours. I had survived. I had built a life without James. And now he thought he could just waltz back in? Like none of it had happened? No, absolutely not. I spent my days pretending everything was fine, working, taking care of Henry, and acting like I wasn't unraveling. But at night, when the house was quiet and my son was asleep, I would sit in the dark, my mind racing. I needed a plan. Because one thing was certain, James wasn't getting away with this. Not this time. I barely slept the next few nights. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw James's face. The shock when he saw me in that hospital room. The way his whole body tensed like a guilty man caught in the act. I wanted answers. No, I needed answers. So when my phone rang a few days later and I saw an unknown number, I picked up. Grace. My stomach flipped. James. I clenched my jaw, forcing my voice to stay calm. You've got 5 seconds to explain why the hell you're calling me. He sighed. Can we meet? Just to talk. Please. I don't think there's anything to talk about, I snapped. You faked your death. You abandoned your son. And now you're engaged to some woman who has no idea what kind of liar she's marrying. What part of that needs clarification? There was silence on the other end. Then softly, please, Grace. I should have said no. I should have told him to go to hell. But against my better judgment, I found myself agreeing. We met at a coffee shop. Neutral territory. I chose a spot by the window where I could see him coming. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. He looked older. More tired. Like the weight of his own lies was finally settling on his shoulders. Good. He sat down across from me, running a hand through his hair. You look good. I scoffed. Save it. Start talking. James let out a slow breath. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I folded my arms. What was it supposed to be like, James? Were you going to fake your death? Run off and never look back? His jaw tightened. I didn't have a choice. I laughed. A cold, bitter sound. No choice? That's funny because I remember begging you to come home. I remember crying myself to sleep while Henry asked when Daddy was coming back. But sure, James. Tell me how you were the victim in all of this. He looked away. I was drowning in debt, Grace. I owed people money. Bad people. It wasn't just some stupid credit card bill. I'm talking dangerous people. I frowned. I hadn't expected that. They were going to come after me. He continued, voice low. And if they couldn't get to me, they would have come after you. Or Henry. A lump formed in my throat. So your grand plan was to fake your own death? I thought it was the only way. I stared at him. And the woman? Zoe? Was she part of the plan too? He winced. Not at first. I met her after everything. She doesn't know about you. Or Henry. My stomach turned. Zoe had no idea. She thought she was engaged to a widower. Meanwhile, James had a whole family he abandoned. I shook my head disgusted. Do you have any idea what you put me through? What you put your son through? His face paled. How is Henry? I leaned forward, my voice cold. Henry is fine. Better than fine. Because he grew up without a father who lies and runs away when things get hard. James flinched. Grace, I cut him off. I don't care about your excuses. I don't care about your sad little story. But I do care about one thing. He swallowed. What? I pulled my phone out of my pocket and hit record. Then I slid it across the table. Say it, I said. His brows furrowed. What? I kept my voice steady. Admit it. Admit that you faked your death. Admit that you abandoned your family. His whole body went rigid. Grace, I can't. I leaned in, lowering my voice. If you don't, I'll tell Zoe. I'll go to the police. I'll make sure your entire fake life crumbles around you. James swallowed hard. He looked at the phone at me, then back at the phone. And then in a low, broken voice he said, My name is James Wilson. 2 years ago, I faked my own death to escape my debts. I left behind my wife, Grace, and my son, Henry. I lied to everyone. I stopped the recording. Then I stood up, pocketed my phone, and walked out. James didn't follow me. I replayed the recording at least a dozen times on the drive home. James's voice, low, strained, guilty, echoed through my speakers. My name is James Wilson. 2 years ago, I faked my own death to escape my debts. I left behind my wife, Grace, and my son, Henry. I lied to everyone. Every time I heard it, I felt something inside me settle. This was proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that everything I had suffered through wasn't just some horrible misunderstanding. James had done this on purpose. And now? Now I had the power to burn his entire world to the ground. I didn't have to wait long for the next step to fall into place. 2 days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. Hello. You need to stop. The voice was female, sharp, and filled with barely restrained anger. I frowned. Who is this? There was a short pause. Then, this is Zoe. I felt a sick sort of satisfaction settle in my chest. Oh, this is gonna be good. I leaned back against my kitchen counter, keeping my voice calm. Ah, Zoe. James's fiancée. How nice to finally speak to you. She scoffed. Cut the crap. James told me everything. Did he? I asked, tilting my head. Did he tell you he faked his death? Did he tell you he left his wife and child to mourn him while he ran off and played house with you? Zoe hesitated. I know now, okay? And I don't need you making this any worse. I laughed, a cold, humorless sound. Oh, sweetie. I don't need to make it worse. It's already worse. She let out a sharp breath. Look, I get it. You're pissed. But you don't understand, James was in trouble. He had to do it. I rolled my eyes. Oh, please. You actually believe that? More silence. Bingo. Pressed on. Let me guess. He's been feeding you sob stories, telling you how he had no other choice, how he was forced to fake his own death. I let out a bitter chuckle. That man has been lying to me since the day I met him. And trust me, he's lying to you too. Zoe didn't say anything, but I could hear her breathing. Heavy. Uneven. Good. She was unraveling. I went in for the kill. Tell me, Zoe. Did you really think you were the only one? That James didn't have other secrets? Because if he could do this to me, what makes you think you're so special? And just like that, she broke. I should have known, she muttered. There were weird things. Things that didn't add up. He told me he had no family, that his wife died in a car crash years ago. Her voice wavered. But he never let me meet his old friends. He always avoided talking about his past. Jesus Christ, I was so stupid. No, I cut in. You were lied to. Zoe let out a shaky breath. What are you gonna do? I smiled. I already did it. Then I hung up. An hour later my phone rang again. It was James. I answered with a smirk. Wow, twice in 1 week. I must be really special. What the fuck did you say to Zoe? Oh, she called you, huh? Let me guess. She's not too thrilled to find out she was engaged to a walking fraud. James growled. You bitch. I clicked the speakerphone button, then hit play on my recording. My name is James Wilson. 2 years ago, I faked my own death to escape my debts. I left behind my wife, Grace, and my son, Henry. I lied to everyone. Silence. I smiled. So, James, what were you saying? His breathing was ragged. Grace. Listen. I can fix this. I nearly choked on my laughter. Oh, fix it? How, James? Are you going to fake another death? Maybe disappear to Mexico this time. I need time. No, my voice was sharp, steady. You don't get time. You don't get anything from me. He made a frustrated noise. Grace, please. But before he could finish, I heard something in the background. A woman's voice. James. Zoe. I grinned. Looks like you've got company. You might want to go handle that. Then I hung up, blocking his number before he could call again. I leaned back against my chair, my heart still racing. James's world was falling apart. And I was just getting started. It didn't take long for James's house of lies to come crashing down. The day after my last conversation with him, I got a call from his parents. Now let me be clear. James's parents and I had never been particularly close. They had always treated me like some temporary inconvenience rather than their son's wife, and when James died, their grief was oddly distant. But now they were calling me like I held all the answers. I let it ring a few times before picking up. Hello. Grace. His mother, Linda, breathed. What in God's name is going on? I just got a call from some woman named Zoe, and she's claiming James is alive. I smirked. Oh, so Zoe actually followed through? Good for her. I don't know, I said, letting my voice drip with sarcasm. Maybe she got that impression when she saw James in a hospital bed after a car accident. Linda gasped like I just slapped her. You knew. I laughed. Oh, I definitely knew. What? James didn't call his mommy to explain. A beat of silence. Then a choked noise, something between a sob and a curse. How could he do this? Do you have any idea what this has done to our family? The shame. That snapped something in me. I gripped the phone tighter, my voice deadly calm. Shame. I repeated. Shame is when you find out your husband faked his own death and left you to raise a grieving child alone. Shame is standing at a fake funeral while your 4-year-old asks why daddy isn't coming home. My voice cracked, but I pushed forward. So no, Linda. I don't give a damn about your shame. Linda spluttered, but I was already done. I ended the call and sat back, breathing hard. Let them deal with him now. The legal side of things moved fast. Once I had James's confession recorded, I contacted a lawyer. I wanted a divorce. I wanted full custody. I wanted everything he owed me and more. And James? He had no way to fight it. By the time he tried to call me again from a different number, since I had already blocked his last one, I had nothing left to say. I have a lawyer now, James. I told him, voice cold and clear. So if you have anything to say to me, you can say it through them. Grace. Click. The next few weeks were glorious. First, James was hit with a fraud lawsuit from his former employer. Turns out faking your death while still under contract is a really bad idea. Then came the financial disaster. His debts, which had apparently not magically disappeared when he died, came back to bite him. Debt collectors, former business partners, even an old landlord. Everyone wanted their cut. And the cherry on top? Zoe dumped him. I got the news from a mutual acquaintance. Apparently, after finding out the full truth, Zoe went nuclear. She took everything she had bought for their shared apartment and left while James was out dealing with his legal mess. By the time I got my official divorce papers in the mail, James was completely alone. And me? I was finally free. It's over. The divorce is final. Full custody is mine. James is drowning in legal battles and debt, and I don't have to see his pathetic face ever again. And yet, I still wake up some mornings expecting the weight of grief to be there. That crushing, suffocating heaviness I lived with for 2 years, believing my husband had died. That I was alone in this world raising a fatherless son. But now the grief is gone, replaced with something lighter. Relief. Freedom. James tried to reach out one last time, through a pitiful email that landed straight in my spam folder. Subject: I'm sorry, Grace. I know I can't undo what I did. I know I ruined everything. I miss Henry. Please don't shut me out completely. I was a coward. I thought I was protecting you. But I see now that all I did was destroy my family. If you ever find it in your heart to let me see him, even just once, I'd be grateful. I'm sorry. For everything. I read it once. Then I deleted it. James had a million chances to do the right thing. He had a son who loved him, a wife who fought for him, a life that he threw away because he thought running was easier. He didn't deserve forgiveness. And he sure as hell didn't deserve Henry. Now life is ours again. I got a promotion at work. It's nothing huge, but it means a raise, better hours, and a little more stability. Henry is thriving. He's 6 now, full of energy and curiosity. He barely remembers James anymore. Every now and then he'll ask a question. Did Daddy like superheroes? Or was Daddy good at soccer? And I give him simple, careful answers. I don't lie. But I don't tell him everything either. Someday when he's older he'll know the truth. And if he ever wants to find James himself, I won't stop him. But for now we're happy. The settlement money James was forced to pay, after my lawyer squeezed every last dime from him, went straight into Henry's college fund. The rest? I used it to put a down payment on a small house. Nothing fancy. Just a little 2-bedroom with a backyard. Enough space for Henry to run around. It's ours. A place where no ghosts linger. A place where James has never been and never will be. A place where we can breathe. If you had told me 2 years ago that I would end up here, standing in the doorway of our new home, watching Henry chase fireflies in the backyard, feeling nothing but peace, I wouldn't have believed you. But here I am. Alive. Whole. Happy. And James? James is just a name in the past.